Hi everyone. What did you think of The Sun Never Sets? Let's give another big I love this movie too. My name is Thomas Lafley. I'm a film critic and programmer, and I'm really honored to introduce you to our guests. Please welcome Dakota Fanning and Cory Michael Smith. So wonderful to have you both here. Thank you for joining us, and congratulations on this lovely movie.
Thank you.
I would like to start with maybe a general question for both of you about Joe Swanberg. We're all fans of him, and he's one of the leading voices in the mumblecore, but we've missed him in cinematic form. What did his cinema mean to you before this project, and what was most exciting to you about collaborating with him? Maybe we can start with you, Dakota.
Sure, yeah. Well, I went to NYU, and I had an advisor. My advisor was named Rahul Hamid, and he introduced me to Joe's films through our studies and work together. And I watched Drinking Buddies and watched some of his, smaller movies, and it was sort of a part of teaching me about mumblecore, as you said. Can't talk about that without talking about Joe and his work. So that was how I was first introduced to him, and remained just such a fan, and also wondering the same thing, where I wanted to see more movies from him. And so Rahul sadly passed away a few years ago, and but when I got this email that Joe and Jake wanted to talk to me about potentially being a part of his next film, I was so excited because I was such a fan because of my great teacher. So yeah, that's sort of how I knew about him and why I was so excited to talk to him. I wanted him to want me to be in it right away.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you all for spending a really beautiful Saturday, New York City afternoon with us and our theater watching this movie. We really appreciate it. Joe, I was aware of Joe in so much as I had seen some of his films, certainly Drinking Buddies. That was the thing I was most familiar with, I think, as most people have been thus far, and I ended up watching that quite a bit leading up to this, just to placate my nerves and figure out like what works, what doesn't when working in improv. But I was like aware that he was sort of like, I mean, he's not that old, but like the grandfather of mumblecore, I guess we should just say father. Yeah, he's pretty young. He's the father of the mumblecore movement, and when I watch it and I'm like, oh wow, look at all these actors improvising. It looks like a nightmare to me. So I like enjoyed watching it, but I was like, I would never work that way because I love a great script. So when I was reached out about this, I happened to be I was shooting a movie called Mountainhead with Steve Carell, Jason Schwartzman, and Rami Youssef, and I was surrounded by these brilliant actors and comedians, and I was so nervous at the idea of trying to improvise through a film, but I was like, there's probably no better launch pad than like working with these guys who are so alive and electric, and I was like, oh my god, well, if I'm going to ruin my career, let's do it now, after this great experience.
So let's talk about that a little bit, about the style in which he works, and then what you bring to a character in helping sculpting these characters, finding them. Maybe we can start with you, Dakota. What was your process of finding Wendy? She is one of the three people who are trying to figure out what they want in life. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your way into that.
Yeah, well, it was obviously a process that I had never worked in before. Joe, writes an outline, and then the rest is kind of a true collaboration and improvised. And but in the first meeting that I had with Joe and Jake, that lasted I think 2.5 hours on Zoom, like a really long time. We just instantly felt like we'd all known each other forever. So that was my first this is a good sign and something that I should put myself out there in this way, even if I'm nervous to have to work in that style. But they said you know, as much as, yeah, there's an outline, it's all improvised, this, that, and the other, it's still made like a real movie. You know what the scenes are, you know what the intentions of the scene are, and the goal is that you get to a point where you know it so well that you're able to improvise, but it's kind of just because you're in the world that you've all created together and like know the character that you've all created together, and so it does end up coming very naturally. And so they had told me that, and I think another thing that was important and a question that I had, where this sort of improv is not like the traditional like comedy improv where you're trying to like who can come up with the funniest bit or like what's the funniest thing, and you have to do different things every time and try and come up with something different. They were like, you don't have to do that. Once we find the formula for the scene that works, then you just do that, and then that just becomes the scene as if it were written that way, and it's filmed like a normal scene. And they were like, we promise you will never not know what to say. And I was like, I really hope so. But I think for me, all my fears, and Cory and I, it was really nice to have Cory as a newbie to this process too, and we had like one dinner like down the street where we both sort of freaked out to each other and like drank too much and we're like, oh my god, we're scared, like and so it was nice that it wasn't like, oh, I was the only person that had never really done this before, so I definitely leaned on Cory a lot with my nerves. But then they just disappeared in the way that Joe and Jake promised that they would, and I think that's because Joe is just the best. Like, he is just the best. He's the best person. He's an incredible director. He's so, like, knows so much about filmmaking, and, you know, he edits the films. He's, you know, he has so much knowledge about what he does. And then Jake is also just the absolute best, and we became such fast friends. So, yeah, and then sorry, I'm talking too much. The way that you do end up bringing yourself to the character was something that I hadn't really done before, and we all kind of shaped it together. I think ideas that Joe and Jake had at the beginning of who Wendy was or who Chuck was, like, they shift and become something different when that part is inhabited by an actor, in this case me and Cory, and so you get to feel that, yes, ultimately you're serving Joe's vision, but at the same time you're a part of that vision too, and so you feel like real part ownership in the story and in the character, in a little bit deeper way than I have experienced before, and I feel like I just can't speak highly enough of this experience, and like how much I loved making it, and how much I loved the movie, and how much I just would go do it over and over again. So anyways, talking too long.
Thank you. Cory, what was your process with Chuck? One of the things I find really hilarious is Chuck and Jake's character are kind of polar opposites in temperament. So tell me a little bit about engaging with that.
Yeah, I was the third person brought on, and I'm familiar enough with Jake and his sense of comedy and wit and intelligence. And I was like, I'm the perfect opposite of that. It wasn't a hard pitch to Joe. No, I similarly had a very long Zoom with Joe. The first interaction, Jake wasn't on because we don't really work together, but we had a really nice conversation where, initially what he shared was, I think, maybe like a 3-page treatment. It eventually it was like a 55 to 60-page treatment that we were working from. But initially it was just a 3-page treatment of the story and the characters generally. And then it was sort of engaging in a conversation about what kind of character is a great opposition to Jack, and what qualities would Chuck offer to Wendy that are also appealing, but in a completely different way. And I had a pretty clear idea of what would be helpful in terms of like positive attributes to really make Chuck appealing. And some of those are kind of implicit in like, she wants spontaneity and being outside and being adventurous and all these things, and having a relationship that's maybe a bit more like sexually stimulating and maybe born of like the mystery of someone who can't communicate as well or isn't as verbally adept as Jack. And then it became, part of Joe's and my conversation about like, all right, well, where do things get complicated with this guy, and how does this, how will this specific relationship be really messy and confounding and problematic and create conflict for Wendy and conflict for the audience viewing it. And unfortunately, I think Joe was drawn to me in part because I was like, I think pre-therapy, some of my problems really match up well with Chuck's. So I really kind of get this guy. And like watching this movie is actually kind of painful for me because some of his behavior is like, it's like, oh, I think this is maybe how he responds in conflict and like shutting down in a way that like, what do you deal with someone when they're not emoting and not communicating? Like, how do you deal with that person? And so, and it was helpful just knowing who Jake is and knowing what his strengths are and seeing him in other movies of Joe's and being like, well, I kind of have an idea of what he's, what his like arsenal is and what he's working with, and I just have to sort of lean into other things. And it was really fun, and we worked completely separately.
I was gonna ask, like, how much did you guys know about what was happening in either side of the relationship?
It became really funny because it sort of became like the movie, because Cory started off, you were by yourself filming the movie was a very short shoot, but you started, and then I came, and then it was like you and me, and then we had a whole dynamic, and then I started working with Jake, and then we had a whole dynamic, and we were like, oh my god, and you had to leave, and then you came back, and we were like, oh, that's right, like we have the whole Chuck's here too, like it, and then Jake was like, so how'd your scenes go with Cory? I'm like, good. They went fine. He was like, good, yeah, fine. Like it became this whole thing, and then I would do my scenes. I did most of my stuff with Jake, and then Cory came back, and we did our stuff together. And it was interesting for me playing Wendy because I would get so in one dynamic as Wendy, and then get so in another dynamic, and then I would be like, I don't know, I would be like, Joe, I think she should end up with Cory, like, and then I would like be in the, and I'd be like, no, I think she should end up with Jack. Like it just, I was being like pulled in different directions because the vibe of each character is different and would bring something out in Wendy in a different way. I mean, that's ultimately kind of a big part of the film, and so I think we all experienced that in like funny ways as the actors, because you only have like one scene with Jake really at the trivia.
Yeah, there's one scene. There was one time where Jake came to set while we were working, and it's when we first reunite.
Like at the bar when we're like,
pool table.
And he was like, your hair looks different today. Because I did, my hair was a little different. I had done something a little different, and he was like, and then he would come up to Cory and be like, great work, not gonna be in the movie. Yep, not gonna be in the movie, like as a joke. Like, it just was so funny. Like it was just
I saw him getting a little itchy. He was watching the monitor, and I saw him look at Joe with like, I don't like this. And that was a great day because I was like, okay, this is going well.
Yeah, totally.
Like, this is good. I like that he's a little agitated by this, and he was like, I gotta go. I have to go.
One of the other things I love about the film is the specificity of the location, how much the production really embraces Alaska, not as a backdrop only, but also like something in the DNA of the story. What was that process for you to really get to know this location? I believe you had someone on set who lived in Alaska, almost like a consultant. She was a producer, so tell me a little bit about that.
Go.
One of the things about Chuck that he offers for Wendy is that he's Alaskan, he lives there, he knows what Alaska is, he loves Alaska for Alaska, and that is not Jack. And I know nothing about Alaska, and it's not that I don't love the outdoors, but I do live in New York City, so I don't spend a lot of time in the outdoors, and I was like, I would really like to be there early, just to spend some time there and maybe explore. meet some people, talk to people. So I was able to go up there about 2 weeks early. And the producer, Ashley Sneed, lives there, and her husband, who is also named Ashley, owns the plane, is a pilot, was an F-18 fighter pilot in the Navy, and we would go flying, and he would like take us over glaciers and flying over braided rivers, and oh, there's a moose, and oh, let's crest this mountaintop and fly through this valley, and then let's go over there like maybe 12 minutes, and there's a lake, you know, that you can only get to through a 12-minute hike, and there's a cabin, and we'll stop and have lunch, and it was the absolute dreamiest. It was very quick to understand how someone could love living there, especially if you have a plane and you can kind of just
which
go
is not as crazy as it sounds there. A lot of people will have a little seaplane like this, you know, and like live on a lake and you see plane. And yeah, there's like a lot of places that you can't even get to. You can only get to them by the little plane. Like it's an unbelievably beautiful place. You kind of can't believe it when you're there, and I think you get to see it in the movie, which I'm really happy about. But yeah, I'm not outdoorsy at all, and so I was like, that's gonna be my biggest challenge. But honestly, when you go there, you can't help but like partake in the nature and like wanting to be out in it and being a part of it. So it actually was very easy to become outdoorsy for this movie. But yeah, we're really grateful to the people in Anchorage and in Alaska. They were really generous with their time and with their anything that they could help us with, and locations and homes and cars and all. Like everyone was so happy to help and not upset that we were there, which was great. Yeah.
Something I'm curious process-wise, because we talked about the improvisational nature of Joe's process, but also he shot this on 35 millimeter. So these almost kind of sound like they wouldn't mesh well together because you cannot go take after take, try after try. So what was that like to make sure that you were really locked in about what the scene should be, so that when the film is running, what you're shooting actually really was very near final?
You know, that definitely is a part of this process of kind of the film game and like how big of a mag to put on for what scene, and like, you know, I learned that actually cutting sometimes wastes more film than just continuing to roll. Joe taught me that. So he would be like, keep it rolling. I'd be like, no, shouldn't we cut? And he's like, no, it actually like cuts more of the film when you cut it. And so I learned so much, and it had been a long time since I had done a movie on film. And what I will say is there is like I think Joe is constantly thinking about that, and Eon Moore, who's the cinematographer, who's amazing, but he never let us feel that. Like we still had time to explore and play, and nothing had to be perfect, and if we needed to, you know, reload or what, like he didn't make us feel inhibited by like the film that is very precious. I still felt the ability to find something and figure it out. But yeah, I think there was a little more, you wanted to be conscientious of the fact that you don't have an endless amount to just like, you know, not find the scene pretty quickly. So yeah, we would rehearse a bit, but sometimes I've found with this process, you can't really find it until you're like actually in it and responding to something that happens. And so, yeah, I thought Joe did an amazing job of not making the actors feel like they had a pressure to perform perfectly, because, you know, we were working with a precious material.
I think too, when we would show up to shoot a scene, we would always talk about it first, so that everyone was just on the same
been talking
page.
about it, you know, so we had already kind of found the same page, and we're all in Anchorage and doing things together, and you know, going to dinner, going to get a drink afterward, like, so there was time, things would come up all the time. It was like 24 hours a day you were kind of making this movie for this finite amount of time, so it was...
We would sort of reflect on, you know, because we were shooting it mostly linearly, and we would sort of talk about if things that had changed in certain scenes or how scenes turned out actually impacted directionally what we were doing or how you calibrate and fix something. There was a scene, and then sometimes scenes would turn out differently than scripted. Not always, but sometimes. And one of my favorites in this film is when she comes back from the art gallery and I've stayed up and we both kind of know what's happened, and that scene was initially scripted to kind of be a really vicious fight. And we talked about it, and then we started doing it, and Dakota walked in, and just like I looked at her face and sort of like how fragile she looked and like the shame that she was just wearing, and it was like, how can you
scream at me, you know?
I mean, look at his face. No, I was like, I can't. I'm sorry. I was like, I can't be that big of a monster. I'm like, I will feel like an absolute tool if I yell at even if someone has caused their own pain. It's like, you know.
Yeah, I think that was a part of it too. Yeah, it ended up being a completely different scene. That was one of the more surprising things that differed from what I think we all had first imagined, and yeah, I think that scene too is like a point where Wendy is most out of control and really has no handle on what she's doing, and yeah, that became clear in the moment when he asked me like if I slept with him and why, and I just said I don't know, you know, that was just something that was not planned, like really not planned, but then ended up feeling so right to all of us, and yeah.
And then on that note of surprise, and I'm also conscious of time, I'm wondering if there were any choices that Joe made in the edit, because he also edits his own movies, that kind of surprised you when you just saw the whole film?
Joe shared a lot of the edits with us as he was in process. Once he had his own time with it, then he sent me and Jake and Cory a link, and we all got to watch it and then talk about it. There was like a few ending sort of things that could have gone a few different directions, but we all kind of talked about what we all thought was the best. I mean, that's the best part about this whole thing is like we were all, as much as it's like I said already, but as much as it's Joe's movie and Joe's vision, it's also like all of ours too. And he really made us feel a part of it while we were making it, before we made it, while we were making it, and in the editing process. And that obviously doesn't always happen, and that's fine. But in this one, because I think you do bring so much of yourself to the characters, it's nice to feel like a part of how it all gets put together. I don't know if there was anything that really surprised me, honestly. Like, it just clicked, it made sense, and it didn't change too much from that first version, just little things.
There's some stuff cut out of it, but I can't even remember some of the things because this makes a lot of sense to me.
Same.
So Joe has a really, and this was also on set, he has a really keen eye about what works, what he needs, and what he's going to use very quickly. And he's very calm about it, which, you know, it's like, I the whole time I just kept being like, Joe, is this okay? Like,
He's like, yeah.
Are you getting what you need? And he's like, yeah.
Totally.
And I should say the ending is absolutely perfect. It's the only ending that would make sense.
Yeah, I agree. We all, when he sent us the last like few minutes with the new ending, I think we all we were on a big email. We were like, that's the one. That's the one.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for watching the movie. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.